Welcome to Frequency. I'm Chuck Ghost.
And I'm Jenni Field. Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture and employee experience, beyond the buzzwords and straight to what matters. And this week we're talking about the hidden cost of empathy at work, what business casual really means in the office, the truth behind the generational divide, and why the always-on culture is a leadership issue.
Yeah, Jenni, getting into this week, I had full plans to talk to you about the World Cup because we had some side chats about it. Mm-hmm. I know you're not some super European football mega fan, but I still want us to talk about it because it's going on out there.
Yeah, sure.
But I'm going to do a bit of a frequency faux pas or reversal or whatever you want to call it, where I am going to do my freak out first because I cannot wait to not talk about this item. It just, when I heard about it and I verified it and it completely blew me away and I'm disappointed. And so let's set the scene here. You're an employee working at a factory. It's 3 a.m. You're diabetic and your blood sugar drops. So you go to the cafeteria to purchase a cookie. And then a few days later, you're an 11-year employee. You're fired because they claim you stole a cookie from the cafeteria. This is a true story that happened at a Ford plant in Kentucky, where this employee, they put these Aramark vending machines where he swiped his debit card. In fact, was it $2? It was $1.95 for a chocolate chip cookie. Swiped it, it failed, went to the next vending machine, swiped it, didn't say that it failed, so he left. He needed the cookie. His blood sugar was dropping. 3 days later, he was fired for stealing, even though he wanted to show them his bank statement that said $1.95 was deducted from this. It's like, I don't know who to be more disappointed in. Am I disappointed in the Ford, the factory, and the plant leadership for firing this employee? The union, who I cannot believe let him get fired over this. When you think about all the other crazy things that go on inside companies, I think I'm actually most disappointed in Aramark, who were like the narcs in this whole thing. Yeah. They're the ones who ratted him out, even though they know the charge went through and they know they've got these faulty kiosks where employees are trying to purchase these things. So now a couple months later, this is all now coming out. Ford had offered him his job back with back pay. And he didn't give them the middle finger, but I'm going to say he gave him the middle finger. And it's like, no, I've already have another job that pays more. And I think, man, what is going on in companies where that decision gets made? 11-year employee, $2 cookie, that decision gets made. The employee's like, wait, no, that's not what happened. They're like, nope, sorry. Like, we've talked about that relationship between employer and employee is changing. I can't believe this happened.
I can and I can't. And I think that's probably worse. Is like when I was reading the story, I was like, oh my God, this is awful. But also, I'm not surprised. And I'm not surprised partly because of the kind of manufacturing side of it, where I do feel like there is a lot of black and white approach in some of those environments. And it feels like it's just that. It's just so unjust. And I love the fact that he went, no, you're all right. I'm good, thanks. I'm not coming back. But I've made my point. And I felt really bad when in the article he was like, I've been there for 11 years, I didn't get to say goodbye to anybody, I wasn't even allowed to go get my staff. Like, it just makes my heart hurt a little bit. Like,
over
I just
a $2 cookie that he actually paid for. I mean, this is the part. Here's the thing. Let's say your Ford Aramark tells you this, you're like, we better figure out what's going on. Let's say an 11-year employee says, hey, my blood sugar was crashing, I had to just grab a cookie, here's the $2. Like, it was, even then, you don't fire somebody over that. It just, it absolutely blew me away. I was freaking out about it. I know communicators at Ford. I know a lot of the team there at Ford. So this isn't like some demonization of Ford, but it's more the plant leadership, the union leadership at that factory, and then the rat in this whole thing, Aramark. Come on.
And I think, do you know what? It's also when policy kind of replaces humanness. And we talked about this, I think, way back last year. I mean, maybe I've talked about it on the podcast or offline, but I was sharing about a friend of mine who was off work due to a family bereavement, a very significant family, and it was like, the policy is, you get, 5 days, and it was like, I think they might need a bit. I was like, no, that's the policy, and it's the same thing. It's like, no, that's the policy. Like, where's the human? Where's the grey? Do you know what I mean? Like, where's the human bit in there? It blows my mind. Well,
also, where's just the common sense?
Yeah.
Where's the common sense in this? $1.95. Even if he had said, yeah, I stole the cookie, is that worth firing somebody over? Which he didn't even do, and they still fired him. It's too much. It's too much.
I'm with you. Right, things that are too much takes me nicely on to our first story, which is about generations at work. Now, this is a conversation I've had for a long time. So this is a link to an article by Rob Briner, who I've talked about before, and I really love his content on LinkedIn. And his quote in his article says, the age range in modern workforces spans Gen Alphas, just starting out in their careers, through to Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, and Baby Boomers still working beyond retirement age. Each has a distinctive way of learning and working, right? We hear this all the time in communications. It's a theory that I have disputed for years, because when I did my diploma paper on generations at work years ago and the impact of different communication styles, I rapidly came to the conclusion that there is nothing to support this belief. And I've just sort of sat on that for a while, because I don't really have anything else to back that up other than my little diploma paper that I did years ago. It's a topic my clients talk about. It was a topic I was asked about on a podcast the other day. It's on conference agendas for internal communicators. I think Gallagher have had it on their conference agenda twice in the last year. But Rob Briner is here to put a stop to this misinformation, and I'm here to help share that message far and wide. So in his recent LinkedIn post, which links to several other posts, it links to lots of academic research papers. He is clear that there is not really any evidence that supports these assertions, and quite a lot that contradicts them. He says such claims about this generational divide are not only scientifically inaccurate, but they cause organisations who believe them to waste time and other resources on practices and activities which are very likely utterly pointless. He also introduces me to the concept of zombie ideas, which I love. Concept being ideas that persist, though the evidence suggests they are not correct. Generational differences is a great example of an idea that is endlessly repeated, even though, as the articles demonstrate, it's highly unlikely to be correct and probably even plain wrong. It says, in general, such ideas persist because we like them and they make sense instantly. Of course, different generations have different ideas. Of course that happens. When this happens around any idea, we should regard that as a warning sign of cognitive bias. Rather than accept it, we should question it even more. He says the best available scientific evidence shows fairly clearly that there are not strong generational differences in attitudes, needs, beliefs, or communication styles. I'm thrilled with this. Chuck, where did this start, and why is it something that nearly every comms person believes, and how can we change their minds?
First off, I don't know if Rob Briner has trademarked or copyrighted zombie ideas, or if it's his, but I'm now going to use it. And Rob, I'll give you credit for this, because one, I love everything zombie related, period. So if we can throw ideas and bring this into work, I'm 100% on board with it, because there's a lot of zombie ideas out there. Now, and this is, I think we could go through episodes, Jenny, and identify some of these zombie ideas. But here's why: because it's simple, and it's easy, and it's not controversial. And so it's people are then going to talk about it and just accept it because of those things. It's simple and it's easy and it's not controversial. I remember years ago, there was an internal communicator. She now has her agency named Mimi Piers, who ran internal comms at the Cosmopolitan. This is before they joined MGM Resorts. And she talked about this very thing. So we're going now 10 years ago. She was talking about this, where they didn't look at employees based on generations, but almost like a psychoanalysis, because you're going to have risk taking of people that are in the boomer generation and people that are Gen Alpha risk takers, or people that are conservative, or that we just like to think this way because it's just easy to put people in the buckets based on you were born here and born there. Now, I do think there's some things to think about when people look at, like I've seen the TikTok videos where they hand and we'll say even Gen Z, like a rotary dial phone, and they're like, use it. Yeah. Like there's different unique access to technologies that every generation has, but the psychology of it is still the same. It's just your stage in life is going to be different. And I think that's where we've gotten lazy with this approach.
Yeah. And do you know what? In the conversation I had on this podcast, we were talking about the fact that it's the environment that is different. It's not you that's different. So your point about I don't know how to use this item, or give, a toddler an iPad and they can just swipe through because that's the environment they've grown up in. They've watched adults swipe through, you know what I mean? They've watched all of that happen. So you instinctively know how to use those things because of the environment that you're in, not necessarily linked to your needs, beliefs, communication styles, or anything like that. It's purely environmental, which is why you can't have generational theory across different cultures around the world, because there's so many different elements to your beliefs, needs, attitudes in different parts of the world that are so much more important to consider than generations. And I just think there's not been enough critical thinking about this. Like when I was reflecting on how much it's on agenda items, how much it's on the minds of some of my clients who are senior internal communication professionals saying, my CEO really wants us to look at the different generations. And I'm like, I don't think we need to. Like, I don't think we do. And now I've got all the links to all the resources to say, here you go. And this is why. And I'm really pleased that there's so much data out there now to back this up, because I think we have to get rid of this. And I'm hoping that by talking about it here, we will help people question this and start to stop it. And, maybe it'll just change the world in about 2 months, because everyone's going to listen to Frequency and go, oh my God, I didn't know this.
I was thinking about this too, though. The people also like the labels, and present company included. Like I talk a lot of times about Gen X. I'm just glad you mentioned Gen X, Jenni, because so often it gets forgotten because everybody talks about boomers and millennials, and we've kind of owned that persona. So it becomes this lazy persona, these lazy buckets, these lazy labels that we know don't really mean anything, but we're trying to apply meaning because everybody's just sort of accepted it.
Yeah, it has to stop. So I'm really excited about that coming forward. The next article is from Business Insider, and it's about the hidden cost of empathy at work. It's a piece that opens with a story about Amy Young, a London-based HR executive who returned from maternity leave in March 2020, just as the pandemic was hitting. And rather than directing her emotional energy toward her newborn, she found herself absorbing her colleagues' anxieties. She was debriefing conflicts. She was effectively becoming this sort of unofficial in-house therapist. And while, as she puts it, nobody was checking in on whether she was okay. Now, the journalist for this article interviewed about a dozen managers for the piece, and the pattern repeats. A Boston consultant who quit because the therapy she felt expected to provide became untenable. An LA healthcare manager who says it's not her actual job that's keeping her up at night. It's the pressure to make her team feel happy and seen in this stressful world. The article then brings along some research from Harvard Business School, where researchers surveyed over 350 professional women managers and found more than 80% spend at least 30% of their work week on caring tasks. So effectively a full day a week as quasi-therapists. 59% said that load had grown over the past year against a 2026 backdrop of economic anxiety, job insecurity and AI disruption. The researchers frame this starkly. Women are becoming the emotional infrastructure of modern work. The article traces to why this falls on women specifically, pointing to benevolent sexism, where women are expected to be warm and caring and penalised when they're not. It also captures the tension with a very different leadership trend. Figures like Mark Zuckerberg, John Stankey, Jamie Dimon, Mark Andreessen have publicly championed toughness, hustle and masculine energy over introspection, which managers like Young say leave women doing more emotional labour in a culture that respects it less. Chuck, the article suggests a few fixes, but what would your advice be to leaders experiencing this, and how do we navigate this challenge of being a therapist and boss?
Man, there are about 8 different angles to this.
We got the time. Go for it.
It's challenging because if I'm looking at it from my perspective, when I managed people and employees would come to you for guidance or just simply to vent or for support, that's a good thing. I think the danger is what you've just described, where it becomes the thing. It starts to overtake, especially when this burden is carried by, we're going to assume this is carried more by women than men. Not to say that some male managers don't and some female managers don't, but it does seem like this burden hits women more, where the fact that typically women do come across more as warm or introspective, like those are great qualities. Those are great qualities. Everybody should be more caring and warm to everyone. Like those are great things. And I think it comes down to the things we see where women are described as bossy, but men are described as something else. And when it's exact same trait, that's that benevolent sexism that's built into it. But let's try to take the gender out of it. I think this is now one of the many challenges of being a manager. I don't think there is a fix to this. If you shun your employees, that's not going to help them. So how do you manage that? I don't know that there's a fix to that. I just think some people are probably better at balancing that and being that resource. Again, I just spoke to a former employee of mine last week. He was going through some challenges. He hasn't worked for me for years, but he still sought that out. So people need that guidance. They need that help. And whether it's in this mentorship role or just this pure like empathetic manager role, that's a good thing. But it's the challenge is when that becomes a burden on someone just simply doing their job. Because when it comes down to this is just a job for everyone.
Yeah. And do you know, I think it also tracks to the change of work since the pandemic in terms of the well-being, the mental health, all the conversations that we now have, burnout, all of it, right? There is now this more emotional side to work that I don't think people are equipped to deal with. I mean, we know that managers aren't really that equipped to deal with even communicating with their team, let alone communicating around anything to do with sort of mental health therapist-esque stuff. I just don't think that training and skill level is there. But I think the report does talk about the fact that women are picking up this burden. And I am aware of that. I do see that. I speak to some of the clients that I coach who are female leaders, and they'll talk about their team and their mental health and their concern for all of those things. And that's hard because then you're worrying about whether someone's okay or not. And there's a line there, I think, that boundary that needs to come in, which is you can't control that. Do you know what I mean? You've got to find that boundary for you as a manager in terms of how much you can influence and support. And I think there's possibly some new training need for managers around how do you support your team without treading into kind of therapy, because you're not a trained therapist. You could do so much more damage. You're not a trained therapist, not a trained coach, not any of those things. I've had this conversation with friends of mine who are in positions, and I'm going, I'm not sure you should be doing this because I'm not sure you're actually trained in coaching. Or it's like, no, but I've got lived experience. That's not enough. You could seriously sort of harm people. So I think there's a risk here for me, not just the risk of the burden on managers and the time it's taking, but the longer term impact that it could have if people aren't trained in how to create those boundaries and how to manage effectively in a more emotional world of work. Maybe that's the thing. And
I think we've all experienced where we see those managers that their natural state where they're more approachable.
Yes.
Their conversations allow you to go into that and maybe be more vulnerable to them again, which isn't a negative thing. The negativity comes when this becomes a burden on them. And to your point, which I had not thought about, the long-term risk of this, both for the individual, but also what if they are empathetic and they're warm and caring, but the advice they give isn't the right one. And that's then where the proper training and coaching needs to come in. That's what I'm saying. I don't think there is a fix to this. It's just more to be aware that this is what's being dumped on some of your managers, male or female, but tends to be more female at this point.
The advice I would give is I did a mental health first aid course back in 2021. I think it was like a 3-day online course. I've got the textbook somewhere in this cupboard because it's about that thick. It's massive. And we went through various different elements of mental health crisis in the first aid and what to do. That's really helped me with some of my friends and extended family and things in what to do. But I feel like almost that should be mandatory now for people, because there is that need to understand what to do so that you're not doing the wrong thing and making sure that you are giving the right advice. And I think that's something that if I was a manager today, well, I am, but if I was a manager in an organisation today, then I would be going and asking for that kind of support, because I just think it's going to get more and more prevalent. And I think you can equip yourself with some of those skills to help some of that. Right, the next piece linked to those challenges at work is some new research from HiBob, who we haven't spoken about for a while. They've done some impact on the always on culture. So saying that it's placing significant pressure on workers across the UK, with nearly half, so 42%, considering quitting roles due to stress. The report suggests that the trend is becoming the norm for many employees, with workplace intensity building significantly in recent years. So this research was with a sample of around 2,000 UK workers, was collected in May 2026. Data says more than half, so 58% of respondents revealed pressure in their role has increased compared to 2 years ago, while 49% feel expected to always be available. 36% now work late on a regular basis, with 50% checking work messages while on holiday, and 55% reveal that they check work messages within just minutes of waking up. 42% admitted checking work messages in the middle of conversations, while 29% do so on dates. Managerial expectations are driving this, according to the survey, with nearly half highlighting a demand to always be available from their manager. And on top of this, senior leadership are playing a role for managers as well. So it looks like it starts from the top. 72% of managers said that they're now expected to maintain consistent high performance levels. Many are absorbing that pressure. Hi Bob noted that this spillover between work and personal life and the negative impacts on employee well-being is what the crux of this is, really. So nearly half feel mentally exhausted at the end of their working day, while stress negatively affects sleep among about 41%. So looking at this research, there's some staggering figures in here, but all of this leads to the top of the organisation. And in our last few conversations and episodes, we've talked about this. All routes lead to the top. So what can HR and leaders do to stop this sense of what I would say is false urgency and always on culture that has become the norm? And is this the same in the US? Because this is a UK study.
I would be shocked if it was any different in the US compared to the UK. I mean, we've all lived this. And this is where I'm going to put blame on both sides of the employer and employee relationship. Both are accountable in this. I mean, I've worked for managers in the past that would send Slacks at 11 p.m. Pacific time, which would be 2 a.m. my time. So when you wake up, you feel this urgency, like I need to respond, but they didn't necessarily set that urgency, but the message sort of did, because they were up late, so do you need to respond right away? And I think it's this having this sort of understanding of how we communicate. What is the expectation? I've sent you some videos from this guy on, I think, whether it's Instagram or TikTok, George Stern, who reads emails and Slack messages and team message that employees are sending him, with this dialogue back and forth with managers, where managers are expecting people to call in on some calls during maternity leave, paternity leave, while they're on vacation, even canceling vacation mid because something happened. So it's always around like who's putting the pressure on them to then violate that relationship. But also there again, I think employees, we've opened that up. We've got apps in Slack and Teams and all those things on our personal devices. We can now log in from home, even if you're not a remote employee. So we've opened that channel up. And I might have told this story in the past, but I remember when my dad worked for General Motors. He was a material traffic manager. So if something went down at the factory and they had to call our house phone, and that was a pretty big violation to call the house phone if like something went down at work. There had to be something critical to get a hold of someone, but it happened occasionally. It was the day my dad brought home a pager. My mom lost her mind, because all of a sudden they could just go straight to him with a little message. He'd get the little beep, look at it, and then have to call in. That was the start. That was the start, where now employees are reachable. Therefore, we're allowed to be reached, and then expectations get set of, and then we see this is the manager lifestyle. Managers are getting that same pressure, so then they're applying the same pressure down the chain.
Do you know, it's interesting, as you were just talking there, and I was having a giggle about pages. I remember getting a pager. I think that was really cool back in the day. But also I wonder whether, and I know that some of this data says that people, 47% feel mentally exhausted at the end of their working day. Part of me wonders whether that's different. If you were to ask your dad, years ago when he finished work, he did before white. He had his page, right? Exactly. White so before he had the pager, before any of that, if you were to say to him, "Are you mentally?" He would be like, "Yeah, I'm exhausted because I've had to, I've been at work, like I've been using my brain, so I'm quite tired." So some of this, I do wonder how much of it is linked to the technology, the always on, and how much of it is linked to this is just work. This is what work has always been, but we don't have a comparison of this data against people 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago to know what
people
that
didn't
felt
care to
like.
ask. No one thought to ask or cared to ask. Yeah.
So we just have this as, oh my God, this is awful. But actually, is it? Or is this just actually how we feel at the end of work if we've got a job that's quite intense, or we're senior, or we've done it? Because I do think there is that. I also agree with you on there is a responsibility of the employee. I have this conversation all the time with my assistant. You don't need to. But she wants, like, there's a part of her that's like, I just want to check in that stuff's okay and I want to do this. And that's her. I can only say it so many times. And she's got to embrace that. And I think that's the part of it, is you've got to find that balance of expectations, but also knowing what you're like. I remember taking my laptop on holiday, and I nearly always take my laptop with me when I travel on holiday. And when I was in Japan earlier this year, I took it, mainly because I had a very long flight and I knew I could get some stuff done that I needed to do. It did not come out of the bag when I was on holiday. It sat in the bag. But if anything had happened, I know I can help. Nothing happened. There was never a call. But to take that option away would make me feel more uncomfortable. And I think there is elements of that we have to consider about our own comfort and how we feel about things. And I'm okay with that. If one of these questions was, do you take your work devices away with you on holiday? And it was like 78% of people have their work, and we'd all be outraged, right? But that's my choice and I'm cool with that. And I did it when I worked in house. So I think there's that critical thinking to apply.
Yeah, I'm thinking back if my dad could have logged in and looked to see, oh, here's where parts are coming in, would he have slept better at night? Like, would he have had peace of mind?
Yeah.
Because I think about that sometimes. Like you, I'm sure a lot of people take a laptop with them on trips. Sometimes it doesn't feel like work, which I think is also the danger.
Yes.
Where we think, oh, we're just dropping in here. Oh, we're just checking this. Oh, we're just responding to this. That's where we've allowed that to ease into, like, no, that's not good for you to do that or feel the need to, or the responsibility to. It's setting up those boundaries. And I think that we have all done a horrible job of establishing those.
But you just made me think then about when we first started Frequency. And I remember saying to you, you were going away. I think it was the first time we had a holiday, either one of us did. And we had the conversation of, do you want me to still send you stuff? Because we're pinging each other articles all the time, like whether we're awake, asleep, it doesn't matter. And you were like, no, it's cool, it's fine. And I feel the same. But at least we had that conversation to check in. And I think that's what you have to do is, do you want me just to not, I can hold them all back for 2 weeks and I can just shove them all at you? Or would you like them? And I think it's having the conversation, right? I think that's the most important thing. Right, the final piece is on business casual. So there was a story going around on LinkedIn about Gen Z redefining business casual. It says, as Gen Z enters the workforce, their preference for comfort and individuality in their fashion choices is reshaping traditional workplace dress codes. The Wall Street Journal reports on this. So many new hires are ditching the dress to impress ritual for their first day of work, opting for oversized silhouettes and athleisure over suits and heels. Post-pandemic work environments and the surge of social media has also blurred expectations and resulted in more flexible policies. One of the professionals said, my outfit doesn't reflect how professional I am, my work does, right? Now, before I come to the question on this, I have things to say. So I saw two women when I was in London the other week, one of whom looked like she was in pyjamas and the other one was in some lace shorts. On both of them, you could see the bottom of their bum cheeks. Both of them were were going to a corporate job. They had like laptops and stuff like that. The woman that looked like she was in pyjamas in the coffee shop, and she had like Ugg slippers on as well. I decided it was a charity day for some sort of pyjama thing, but I was baffled as to why she was going to work in that. But for those that have listened to regular listeners, you might remember last week, we had a conversation about my stylist and whether or not you feel the same about this. So I messaged my stylist, Lisa, and sent her this business casual piece and said, what's your take on this as a stylist in terms of this business casual thing? She said, here are my thoughts. Whilst I absolutely believe that your work, skills and results are the true measure of your professionalism, first impressions still matter. What we wear is a form of communication before we've said a word. Taking time to look considered and appropriate for your role doesn't mean wearing a suit or conforming to outdated dress codes. It means understanding your environment, your audience, and the message you want to send. Comfort and individuality can absolutely sit alongside professionalism. The key is dressing for the role you have while also reflecting the role you aspire to. A polished appearance builds confidence, reinforces credibility, and shows respect for both yourself and those you're meeting. Your clothes don't do your job for you, but they can help open the door before your work speaks for itself. And I quite liked that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'd agree with her. She's my stylist. I've worked with her for years. So what's your thought on this?
Yep. I do not care. I do not care. And also, you do not have to care, but people will. And this is where, when like you see these LinkedIn posts where people are like, oh, what's the best business advice someone has ever given you? I always say, my answer is learn how to use an iron. Because that was the advice given to me at my very first job by Stephanie Jenkins. This was back in 1998. First job out of college. I rolled in probably like flannel button down then and like wrinkled khakis and did great work. And it was like a review period, like a 90-day review period. And after that, they're like, are you hired full time or not? So thankfully I got hired full time. And she's like, yes, but you got to learn how to use an iron. Like, it does matter. The quality of your work matters, but also how you present yourself also matters. So you do not have to care. I don't care how people dress, but other people will. And it's that, to kind of what your stylist said, what are you trying to project out there? This is a bit like when you see people on the internet in these memes, like showing up dressed to work as Batman, where it's like, don't dress for the job you have, but the job you want.
Yeah.
There's a bit of that. So if you want to be seen as a thing about the org chart above, then you have to dress in that level because that's how people will perceive you. Yeah. But to my first thing, I do not care.
I love that. I love that. I love that so much. I do care, and I care for the reasons that Lisa's kind of outlined. The environment. The two women that I saw the other day, I was just genuinely shocked. Like, it's really hot in the UK. I feel very seen now. I haven't ironed my linen shirt talking to you about needing an iron. It's so hot here, so I understand that it is hard to navigate that heat. But seeing your butt cheek is not something that I think is appropriate, and I think it's the environment that you have to consider in the workplace and what's appropriate. And I'm sure this is going to cause some discussion.
There's a bit of an evolution here, and I'm going to go back to when I worked for General Motors. There was I wouldn't say it was a policy, it was just sort of a known behavior that on Fridays you could wear jeans. Yeah. But the other days of the weeks but then it turned into like, well, people sort of wore jeans other days. It very quickly devolved into, you basically wore jeans all the time unless someone from Detroit was there, unless someone higher up was there. So it's very easy to see this. It's a slippery slope that everyone can fall into. I didn't obviously see these two women. Maybe it was something going on at work. Maybe because there's like, it's so bloody hot here, kind of wear whatever. I don't know. But again, I'm not losing any sleep over it. So
bizarre. Good. So you don't have a freak out today because you did your freak out.
I'm like, go back to it. $1.95 cookie. $1.95 cookie. That is my freak out. Shame on you, Aramark. Shame on you, Ford factory leadership. Shame on you, union leadership. Okay, there I'm done.
There, you're done. So my freak out sort of links to the beginning of your opening today, which is just to recognise that the World Cup's on, because I had a huge freak out this week. And like you said, I'm not a big football fan, but I will watch the World Cup. Wimbledon's also on at the moment. So there's a lot of sport in our house. And I was furious at the red card U-turn for the USA. And I messaged you about it. And I was like, I'm going to have to talk about this because and not because of the individuals involved, but I think in line with my work.
Oh, you can include the individuals involved. Okay. That's fine. That's fine.
But for me, it's the credibility, it's the integrity, it's the leadership, it's all of those things that we talk about work. And then you see that this like, oh, I'm just going to ring up my mate and go, that's not really okay. You know, what do you think? I goes, that's not really okay. I'll just change it. Like, what? And because I'm such a systems and process person, I'm like, there are rules. There were rules and the rules were followed. And I hate it when people try and get around rules by using their power and influence. And it just made me boil with rage. And I'm really glad that as we're recording now, they're out. And I'm thrilled at that because my thought was the team won't play him. The team will do the right thing and they won't play him. No, played him. But, Belgium beat them. So I feel better about that.
Surely you didn't think that FIFA was an upstanding
Well,
organization to begin with. I mean, come on. They've kind of have a bit of a pretty decent track record of corruption. So the fact that I'm embarrassed by it. It's embarrassing. And I think karma played out. Like the ball don't lie played out in this. And I think it actually disrupted the team because all of a sudden, what was a really feel-good moment for the U.S. men's national team all of a sudden became a very embarrassing one. And I will fully blame our president for jumping in on this because before he wasn't even talking about it. He wasn't anywhere near World Cup and everybody was loving it and embracing it. And the moment he jumps in, everything sours. So lesson learned, everyone.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I was furious. So I wanted to have a freak out about that. But I'll finish on a positive freak out and then it's my birthday next week. So I'm very excited about having some time off work and celebrating with friends and family and lots of food and drink because that's how we celebrate things, isn't it? What's your phrase? Everything in, not abundance. That's not your word.
Elaborate and unnecessary.
Elaborate. It's going to be an elaborate and unnecessary week for me, and I can't wait for it. So that's it this week. Thank you for joining us. We hope the articles and insights will help you think about how to improve comms, leadership, and culture in your organisation. And if you don't yet subscribe or follow, please do, as it helps make sure you won't miss an episode. All the links to all the articles we've mentioned today are in the show notes. You can grab those to read if you want to explore anything further. We'll be back with you on Monday with more news, insights, and opinions about everything comms and leadership in workplaces today. Appreciate you being here with us.